The following presentation is intended strictly for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute professional automotive, financial, or legal advice. Auto repair estimates, mechanical diagnostics, consumer protection laws, and contractual obligations vary significantly depending on your specific vehicle make, model, year, and the specific jurisdiction or state in which you reside within the United States. For example, consumer rights in states with stringent oversight, such as California governed by the Bureau of Automotive Repair, will differ vastly from regulations in states with minimal automotive industry oversight. The financial scenarios, repair costs, mechanical breakdowns, and billing practices discussed in this masterclass are based on historical trends, case studies, and potential outcomes, not definitive guarantees or absolute rules. We do not provide financial guidance regarding debt taken on for automotive repairs, nor do we offer specific legal counsel on how to sue or arbitrate against a business. You must conduct your own independent due diligence, rigorously research your local state regulations regarding automotive estimates, and consult with certified, independent automotive technicians or legal professionals regarding your specific situation before authorizing any mechanical work, surrendering your vehicle, or signing binding financial contracts at any auto repair facility. By watching this presentation, you acknowledge that you are solely responsible for your own consumer decisions, financial liabilities, and vehicle maintenance choices. Now, let us begin with the reality that the automotive repair industry does not want you to analyze. Every single day in the United States, thousands of hardworking people walk into an auto repair shop with a minor vehicle issue and drive out days later completely financially devastated. Consider the comprehensive case study of a driver named Michael from Columbus, Ohio. Michael drove a standard, incredibly common 5-year-old mid-size sedan. One Tuesday morning, he heard a faint metallic rattling noise coming from underneath the chassis while accelerating onto the interstate. Like any responsible, safety-conscious vehicle owner, he took his car to a highly rated local independent shop to get a professional opinion. He expected a simple diagnosis, perhaps a loose exhaust bracket or a worn-out serpentine belt. Instead, the service advisor handed him an incredibly dense, multi-page computer-generated estimate totaling $4,250. The advisor looked Michael dead in the eye, pointed to a complex, colorful diagnostic diagram, and stated that his vehicle was experiencing a catastrophic internal transmission failure, that it was entirely unsafe to drive off the lot, and that the entire system needed to be completely rebuilt immediately. Overwhelmed, intimidated by the heavy technical jargon, and fearing for his physical safety on the road, Michael signed the authorization form, draining his entire emergency savings account in a matter of seconds. 2 weeks later, after the massive repair was completed, Michael was talking to a retired master mechanic friend who asked to look at the old, discarded parts the shop was legally required to return upon request. That retired mechanic discovered the transmission components were perfectly fine, exhibiting only normal wear and tear for the mileage. The original metallic rattling noise? It was a simple, slightly loose catalytic converter heat shield. The actual cost to repair that specific issue should have been a single stainless steel hose clamp and 15 minutes of labor, equating to perhaps $50 at most. Michael was legally and financially trapped because he signed a complex legal estimate he did not fundamentally understand. This is not an isolated incident. It represents a systemic exploitation of consumer ignorance. Industry historical trends suggest that American drivers waste billions of dollars annually on unnecessary, unauthorized, or massively inflated automotive repairs. But here is the most disturbing part of Michael's story, and the real reason you cannot afford to miss a single second of this presentation. The service advisor who sold Michael that unnecessary transmission rebuild used a very specific, highly orchestrated psychological tactic embedded directly within the written estimate itself. It is a formatting trick designed to overwhelm your critical thinking, intentionally hide the actual labor rates, and force you into an immediate, panicked compliance. This specific formatting tactic is currently being utilized by an overwhelming majority of chain and independent repair shops across the country, and I am going to expose exactly what that trick looks like on paper later in this masterclass so you never fall victim to it. You are watching this because you know the deep, sinking feeling in your stomach when the service advisor approaches you in the waiting room holding a clipboard. You know the profound anxiety of relying on a vehicle to get to your job, transport your family safely, and maintain your livelihood, while simultaneously knowing absolutely nothing about how that incredibly complex mechanical and electronic machine actually operates. This masterclass is designed to fundamentally dismantle that power imbalance today. We are going to solve the ultimate consumer vulnerability: the complete lack of transparency in automotive repair billing in the United States. Think about the sensory experience of a modern dealership or high-end independent shop waiting room. They offer you complimentary gourmet coffee, oversized leather chairs, and massive television screens playing daytime programming. This environment is highly calculated. It is designed to lull you into a state of passive comfort, while deliberately isolating you from the service bay where the actual physical diagnosis is occurring. You are intentionally separated from your vehicle, creating a massive information vacuum. When the advisor finally steps through those double doors, holding that heavy bond paper estimate, they are entering the negotiation from a position of absolute, unassailable authority. They use acronyms that sound like a completely foreign language: OBD2 codes, PCM flashes, torque converter lockups, variable valve timing solenoids, and McPherson strut assemblies. This engineered confusion is the exact moment the financial trap closes. The potential outcomes of signing that paper without a rigorous, line-by-line cross-examination can mean the difference between a minor financial inconvenience and plunging yourself into high-interest credit card debt just to get your primary mode of transportation back. By the time you finish this comprehensive deep dive, you will possess the precise analytical skills required to look at any highly technical auto repair estimate and instantly decode the truth hidden behind the industry jargon. We will explore the exact mathematical formulas shops use to calculate their labor times, pulling back the curtain on the industry-standard flat-rate manual system. Historically, the automotive repair industry shifted away from charging you for the actual real-world time a mechanic spends working on your car, moving instead toward a complex matrix known as the flat-rate system. This historical trend fundamentally altered consumer billing. If the flat-rate book dictates that replacing a water pump takes exactly 4.5 hours, you are going to be billed for 4.5 hours of labor at the shop's posted hourly rate, regardless of whether a seasoned master technician completes the job in 90 minutes. This system incentivizes speed, which can sometimes be beneficial for shop throughput, but it also creates massive loopholes for a practice known as overlapping labor. Overlapping labor is a deceptive practice where you are charged multiple times for the labor required to access a single area of the engine bay. We will dissect these overlapping labor scenarios with surgical precision so you can spot them instantly. Furthermore, we will meticulously break down the critical differences between original equipment manufacturer parts, aftermarket alternatives, and salvaged components, and explain exactly how service advisors manipulate the markup margins on these parts to drastically inflate your final bill. I will guide you through the exact terminology that separates a necessary, immediate safety repair from a speculative, profit-driven suggested maintenance item. We are going to analyze real-world case studies of predatory estimates line by line so you can see exactly where the phantom fees are buried, ranging from generic shop supplies charges that should be considered overhead, to inflated and entirely fabricated hazardous waste disposal fees. This masterclass is not about demonizing honest mechanics, of whom there are tens of thousands of hardworking individuals, but rather about arming you with the definitive, sophisticated knowledge necessary to protect your personal financial well-being. The American landscape is utterly dependent on personal transportation, and the cost of maintaining that transportation has skyrocketed due to incredibly complex vehicle computer networks and advanced diagnostic requirements. When you thoroughly understand your auto repair estimate, you transition immediately from a vulnerable target to an empowered, highly educated consumer who dictates the terms of the financial transaction. You will learn the exact questions to ask the service advisor, the specific physical documentation to demand before opening your wallet, and the verbal negotiation tactics that will powerfully signal to any repair facility that you are not the person to be taken advantage of today. We are going to build an impenetrable fortress around your bank account, ensuring that every single dollar you spend at a repair facility is fully justified, mechanically necessary, and fairly priced based on current market realities. Let us transition directly into the very first thing you see when that piece of paper is placed in front of you. The anatomy of a modern auto repair estimate is deliberately complex and heavily engineered to guide your eyes away from the actual costs. In the year 2026, as vehicles have fully transitioned into rolling supercomputers interconnected by miles of complex wiring harnesses, the diagnostic process has fundamentally changed, and the way you are billed for that process has become increasingly opaque. Let us look at a case study involving a driver named Jessica, a traveling sales representative based in Dallas, Texas. Jessica drove her late-model crossover vehicle to a major national repair chain because her check engine light illuminated on the dashboard, accompanied by a severe hesitation when accelerating from a dead stop. When the service advisor handed Jessica the printed estimate, the very top section was labeled with a phrase you must learn to instantly recognize and scrutinize: customer states. This section is not just polite administrative record-keeping for the shop. It is the absolute legal foundation of the entire financial transaction. If the customer states section reads something incredibly vague, such as customer states car runs poorly or customer states engine makes noise, you have already lost the first and most critical battle of the negotiation. Why? Because you have inadvertently given the repair facility a blank check to diagnose virtually every single system in the vehicle under the guise of finding the root cause of running poorly. Historical trends clearly show that vague initial complaints lead directly to bloated, wide-ranging diagnostic fees. The potential outcome of a poorly documented initial complaint is a cascade of unnecessary testing that you are legally obligated to pay for. Imagine if you walked into a specialized medical facility and simply told the intake nurse that you felt bad, rather than specifically pointing to a sharp stabbing pain in your lower right abdomen. The resulting medical billing would reflect a massive battery of wide-ranging, incredibly expensive full-body tests, simply trying to narrow down the scope of your vague complaint. The automotive repair industry operates on the exact same fundamental principle. Jessica should have firmly ensured the estimate explicitly read: customer states check engine light is illuminated and engine severely hesitates specifically between 0 and 20 miles per hour during moderate acceleration on flat pavement. By narrowing the exact scope of the physical complaint, you legally constrain the diagnostic authorization. You are telling the technician exactly where to focus their expensive time and, more importantly, where they do not have permission to look. Directly below the customer states section, you will inevitably encounter the diagnostic fee. This is where massive consumer confusion and systemic overcharging routinely occur. A vast majority of American consumers fundamentally believe that a technician plugging a handheld digital scanner into the onboard diagnostic port located under the dashboard constitutes a comprehensive diagnosis. It absolutely does not. The scanner simply pulls a generalized electronic fault code generated by the vehicle computer, not a specific broken mechanical part. Let us assume the digital scanner pulls a code indicating a lean fuel mixture condition in bank 1 of the engine block. That code does not definitively mean the oxygen sensor is physically broken and requires immediate replacement. It could easily be a cracked rubber vacuum hose, a failing mass airflow sensor, a heavily clogged fuel injector, or a leaking intake manifold gasket. The diagnostic fee you are paying is meant to cover the highly skilled technician's actual time to physically pinpoint test those individual components using specialized tools like digital multimeters or oscilloscopes to find the actual singular point of failure. However, you must rigorously scrutinize how this fee is calculated and applied to your final bill. A standard industry practice across the United States is to charge a flat 1 hour of labor for initial diagnostics. But consider the mathematical reality. What happens when the technician successfully identifies the broken vacuum hose in exactly 12 minutes? Do you receive a prorated refund for the remaining 48 minutes of labor you just purchased? Absolutely not. You pay the full hour regardless of the actual time spent. This brings us to the core financial engine of the modern auto repair industry, the flat rate billing system. Thoroughly understanding this specific concept is entirely non-negotiable if you want to protect your personal finances. Historically, decades ago before the widespread adoption of computerized labor guides, mechanics charged consumers based on the actual literal time punched on a physical shop clock. If a repair took 2 hours of physical labor, you were billed for 2 hours of labor. That entirely logical system has been almost completely eradicated from the modern industry. Today, the entire automotive repair ecosystem relies on massive, constantly updated digital software databases that assign a rigid, predetermined time value to every conceivable repair on every specific make, model, and year of vehicle. If you are driving a 2026 hybrid sedan and need the electronic water pump replaced, the service advisor types your vehicle identification number into their proprietary software. The software dictates that this specific component replacement takes exactly 3.4 hours of labor. You are going to be billed for 3.4 hours of labor, mathematically multiplied by the shop posted hourly labor rate. Let us assume the independent shop charges $180 per hour. Your labor charge is firmly and unalterably set at $612. Here is the critical psychological barrier you must fully understand and accept. It does not matter if the technician working on your vehicle is a 20-year veteran master mechanic who has performed this exact job hundreds of times and completes the physical labor in 90 minutes. You are still legally obligated to pay for the 3.4 hours dictated by the digital flat rate manual. The repair facility just generated a massive, hidden profit margin based entirely on that technician's individual speed and efficiency. This flat rate system is explicitly designed to reward fast mechanics and highly profitable shop throughput. The standard argument from the automotive industry is that you are paying for the professional expertise, the expensive tooling, and the guaranteed final result, not the literal minutes ticking by on a clock. While there is a degree of validity to that specific perspective, the potential outcome for the uneducated consumer is severe financial overcharging, especially when the flat rate times are deliberately manipulated on the estimate. This introduces the concept of overlapping labor. Consider a highly common scenario where multiple physical repairs are required in the exact same physical location, deep within the engine bay of the vehicle. Imagine if you hire a residential contractor to tear open a drywall section in your kitchen to fix a leaking copper water pipe, and while the wall is already entirely open, you ask them to upgrade the electrical wiring right next to that exposed pipe. A fair and ethical contractor would never charge you twice for the extensive physical labor of tearing down and rebuilding that exact same wall. Yet, in the automotive repair industry, this exact type of double charging happens constantly every single day, and it is explicitly hidden in plain sight within the rows and columns of your written estimate. Let us return to a detailed case study, this time looking at a consumer named David from Chicago. David needed a new primary timing belt on his high-mileage import sport utility vehicle. The computerized flat-rate manual dictates 4 complete hours of labor for the timing belt replacement. At the exact same time, the service advisor highly recommended replacing the mechanical water pump, which is physically located directly behind the timing belt housing. The flat rate manual lists the water pump replacement as a separate 3-hour job. If David does not know exactly how to rigorously read his estimate, the service advisor will simply add the 4 hours for the timing belt and the 3 hours for the water pump, legally billing David for 7 total hours of highly expensive labor. This practice is mathematically and ethically deeply flawed. To physically access the water pump on this specific vehicle, the technician absolutely must remove the timing belt and all associated covers first anyway. The heavy physical labor of dismantling the front of the engine to get to the water pump is entirely covered by the 4 hours of labor already billed for the timing belt replacement. The actual literal additional time required to unbolt the old water pump and bolt on the new one, once the timing belt is already completely removed and laying on the workbench, is perhaps 20 minutes at most. David should have been billed for the 4 hours of the timing belt, plus a minor fractional addition of a few tenths of an hour for the water pump itself, not the full 3 hours of standalone independent labor. He was financially scammed out of hundreds of dollars in overlapping labor simply because he did not know how to identify the duplicate charges stacked seamlessly on top of each other on the printed page. This overlapping labor trap is precisely where repair shops dramatically maximize their profit margins at your direct expense, and they rely entirely on your inherent reluctance to question their computer-generated numbers. The printed numbers look official. The layout looks highly professional, but the fundamental math is actively working against you. You must train your eyes to scan for these interconnected, physically adjacent repairs. If you see 2 major mechanical components being replaced in the exact same physical area of the engine bay, your internal alarm system must trigger immediately. You must demand that the service advisor recalculate the labor based on overlapping access times. But labor times, diagnostic fees, and overlapping access charges are only 1/2 of the complex equation that dictates your final financial liability. Even if you manage to successfully negotiate fair labor times and completely eliminate overlapping charges, the repair facility has another incredibly powerful, deeply hidden mechanism designed to quietly siphon money directly from your bank account. It involves the physical metallic and plastic components actually going into your vehicle. You might reasonably think a replacement part is just a standardized part, but the global supply chain economics behind what gets bolted onto your car is a vast labyrinth of tiered wholesale pricing, hidden retail markups, and dramatically varying manufacturing quality standards. The specific brand of brake pad or alternator listed on your estimate could single-handedly inflate your final bill by hundreds of dollars without adding a single day to the functional lifespan of your vehicle. The way service advisors source, categorize, and price these physical components is a closely guarded industry secret, and understanding their complex markup matrix is the very next critical step in aggressively defending yourself, which leads us directly into the most expensive line item on the entire document: the parts matrix. When you look at your estimate, you will see a column specifically dedicated to the physical components required for your repair. Most consumers glance at the final number, wince, and accept it as a fixed, unavoidable reality of vehicle ownership. This is a massive analytical failure. The price listed on that paper is almost never a standardized retail price. It is a highly variable, heavily manipulated figure generated through a complex sliding scale markup system that heavily favors the repair facility. To understand how this works in the year 2026, we must definitively categorize the 4 distinct classifications of automotive parts, because the specific tier of part your service advisor chooses to install drastically alters both the historical trends of your vehicle longevity and the immediate financial impact on your wallet. The first tier is original equipment manufacturer, commonly referred to as OEM. These are the parts that come directly from your vehicle manufacturer dealership network, packaged in boxes bearing the official logo of the company that built your car. Dealerships will almost exclusively use OEM parts, and they represent the absolute highest price point on the market. The service advisor will tell you that OEM parts are required to maintain your vehicle integrity, which sounds incredibly convincing. However, a massive secret in the automotive manufacturing sector is that the car companies themselves do not actually manufacture the vast majority of these components. They contract external global suppliers to build them. This leads us directly to the second, and arguably most important, tier for an educated consumer: original equipment supplier or OES parts. These are manufactured by the exact same external companies that built the original parts for the car brand on the assembly line. They roll off the exact same manufacturing lines, using the exact same molds, materials, and quality control standards. The only physical difference is that they are placed in a box with the supplier logo, such as Bosch, Denso, or NGK, rather than the car manufacturer logo. By legally bypassing the dealership parts network, OES parts typically cost 30 to 50% less than OEM parts, while providing the exact same potential outcomes for reliability. If your estimate does not explicitly state whether a part is OEM or OES, you are essentially flying blind. The third tier consists of aftermarket parts. The aftermarket landscape is a wild, unpredictable territory. Some aftermarket companies re-engineer original parts to correct known factory defects, making them superior to OEM components. However, historical trends dictate that a massive flood of the aftermarket components utilized by large chain repair shops are low-tier, white-box items manufactured overseas with highly questionable metallurgy and substandard quality control. These parts are incredibly cheap for the shop to purchase wholesale. Finally, we have remanufactured or rebuilt components. These are previously failed parts like alternators, starters, or brake calipers that have been completely disassembled, chemically cleaned, and fitted with brand new internal wear components. Remanufactured parts are an industry standard and are entirely acceptable for many repairs, provided they are rebuilt by a highly reputable company operating with strict engineering tolerances. Now, let us examine a detailed case study to demonstrate exactly how repair facilities weaponize these part categories against you. Consider Sarah, a public high school teacher living in Atlanta, Georgia in 2026. Sarah drove her 2019 midsize domestic sedan into a highly visible, heavily advertised independent repair chain because her dashboard battery warning light illuminated, and the vehicle subsequently stalled in a major intersection. The shop correctly diagnosed a completely failed internal voltage regulator within the alternator. When the service advisor handed Sarah the printed estimate, the line item for the replacement alternator was listed at a staggering $685. Because Sarah was uneducated in the complexities of the parts matrix, she assumed this was simply the going rate for a complex electrical component. She did not ask for the specific brand name or the part number. She just authorized the repair to get back on the road. Had Sarah demanded the exact part number and run a simple internet search on her smartphone in the waiting room, she would have discovered a horrifying financial reality. The shop installed a bottom-tier, low-quality remanufactured aftermarket alternator. The shop purchased this specific component from a local commercial auto parts distributor just down the street for a wholesale commercial price of exactly $140. The shop then applied an aggressive sliding scale markup matrix to that part. In the automotive industry, cheaper parts receive massively higher percentage markups than expensive parts. A $10 engine oil filter might be marked up 300% to $40. A massive $2,000 transmission assembly might only be marked up 25%. In Sarah's case, the shop took a $140 substandard alternator, marked it up nearly 400%, and sold it to her for $685. Imagine if you went to a local grocery store to buy a simple gallon of milk. Imagine if the price tag was completely blank, and the cashier looked at the brand of milk, secretly looked up what the store paid the local dairy farmer, mathematically multiplied that number by 4, and then told you the price was $25. You would immediately walk out of the store in disgust. Yet, American consumers accept this exact same predatory retail model in auto repair shops every single day, simply because they are intimidated by the complex mechanical nature of the transaction. Furthermore, service advisors use a highly deceptive verbal tactic called quoting the list price. When you question the exorbitant cost of a part, the advisor will often turn their computer monitor around and point to a specific column labeled MSRP or list price. They will visually show you that the manufacturer list price is actually $750, and proudly claim they are doing you a massive favor by only charging you $685. This is a complete statistical fabrication. The list price is an artificially inflated, highly unrealistic number programmed directly into the shop estimating software specifically designed to make the heavily marked up shop price look like a consumer victory. The only number that truly matters is the actual wholesale cost the shop paid for the part, which they will never willingly disclose to you. To aggressively defend your bank account, you must force absolute transparency into the parts transaction. The moment an estimate is placed in your hands, you must ask the service advisor 3 highly specific questions. First, what is the exact brand name and manufacturer part number of every single component listed on this document? Second, is this part explicitly classified as OEM, OES, aftermarket, or remanufactured? Third, what kind of comprehensive national warranty comes specifically with this exact tier of part? By demanding this specific data, you instantly signal to the advisor that you deeply understand the wholesale parts matrix. You strip away their ability to hide a cheap, heavily marked up component behind a generic description like alternator assembly. You force them to logically justify their pricing based on verifiable, publicly accessible data. If a repair facility absolutely refuses to provide you with the exact brand and part numbers, you are dealing with a business entity that relies entirely on profound consumer ignorance to generate their profit margins. You must immediately decline the repair, pay the diagnostic fee, and safely retrieve your vehicle. You possess the absolute fundamental consumer right to know exactly what physical materials are being bolted onto a heavy machine that travels at highway speeds carrying your family. By mastering the flat rate labor times and meticulously dissecting the parts markup matrix, you have successfully neutralized the 2 largest financial threats on the repair estimate. You have systematically dismantled the core profit engines of the predatory service advisor. However, the psychological warfare does not end with labor and parts. If you look incredibly closely at the very bottom of the document, just above the final terrifying total, you will see a cluster of highly vague, vaguely official-sounding fees. These are not mechanical repairs. They are not physical parts. They are arbitrary percentages cleverly disguised as mandatory legal charges, and they are quietly siphoning millions of dollars from American consumers every single week. We are about to dive into the absolute darkest, least regulated corner of the entire billing process. We are looking directly at the miscellaneous fees section. The most common and aggressively abused line item is almost always labeled shop supplies. To the untrained eye, this phrase seems entirely logical. Fixing complex machinery requires ancillary materials. However, historical trends show that the billing mechanism for this specific fee is completely disconnected from physical reality and operates essentially as an unregulated profit center. What exactly are shop supplies? In the context of a commercial garage, this category encompasses chemical solvents, aerosol brake parts cleaner, heavy-duty shop rags, plastic zip ties, floor sweeping compound, mechanic barrier cream, and bulk penetrating oil. The actual literal physical cost of these consumable items used during a standard repair amounts to pennies, perhaps a few dollars at the absolute maximum. Yet, repair facilities across the United States do not itemize these materials based on actual consumption. Instead, they utilize aggressive invoicing software programmed to automatically calculate shop supplies as a fixed mathematical percentage of your total labor cost. This percentage generally ranges between 5 and 15%, often capped arbitrarily at $40 or $50 per invoice. Let us examine a highly specific case study to illustrate the profound absurdity of this practice. Consider a consumer named Robert living in Phoenix, Arizona in the year 2026. Robert took his late-model pickup truck to a well-known regional chain shop for a simple electrical diagnostic. His dashboard display was malfunctioning. The master technician plugged an advanced diagnostic scanner into the vehicle, quickly identified a faulty interior dimming switch, unclipped a plastic dashboard bezel, removed 2 small retaining screws, unplugged a wiring harness, and snapped the new electronic switch into place. The entire physical procedure took roughly 30 minutes and required absolutely 0 chemical cleaners, 0 lubricants, and 0 shop racks. Because the flat-rate diagnostic and installation labor charge was billed at $250, the shop software automatically generated a 10% shop supplies fee of $25. Robert paid $25 for literal thin air. He paid a hidden tax to cover the generic overhead of the business. Imagine if you sat down at an upscale seafood restaurant, ordered a premium dinner, and when the final bill arrived, you noticed an unavoidable 8% surcharge labeled restaurant supplies. When you ask the manager to explain this charge, they tell you it covers the cost of the paper napkins you used, the industrial dish soap required to wash your silverware in the back kitchen, the mop water used on the dining room floor, and the hand sanitizer in the restroom. You would be absolutely outraged. You would immediately recognize that those consumable items are fundamental overhead costs required to operate a restaurant, and they should be completely factored into the baseline price of the food itself. You would never accept paying for them as an entirely separate line item. Yet, in the automotive repair industry, millions of consumers blindly accept this exact same billing structure every single day simply because it is printed on heavy bond paper and looks like a mandatory municipal tax. Moving just below the shop supplies trap, you will almost certainly encounter another highly deceptive charge labeled hazardous waste disposal or environmental impact fee. This terminology is incredibly powerful because it leverages your civic responsibility. It sounds incredibly official and implies that the repair facility is merely passing along a strict, non-negotiable government mandate for safely disposing of your old motor oil, engine coolant, or depleted transmission fluid. The reality behind the scenes is far more complex and highly profitable for the shop ownership. It is entirely true that commercial repair facilities must adhere to strict Environmental Protection Agency guidelines regarding fluid containment and disposal. However, what the service advisor will absolutely never disclose to you is that used automotive fluids, particularly motor oil, are incredibly valuable global commodities. Many large repair facilities do not pay exorbitant fees to have their massive underground holding tanks emptied. In fact, many shops actually sell their thousands of gallons of used oil to specialized industrial recycling companies. These recycling firms refine the used oil into lower-grade lubricants or burn it in massive industrial furnaces for energy. The repair shop is potentially generating direct revenue from the recycler who pumps out their tanks, while simultaneously turning around and charging you a flat $5 or $10 environmental fee on your invoice to dispose of that exact same fluid. This practice is the absolute definition of commercial double-dipping. Furthermore, this fee is often applied completely indiscriminately. If you are taking your vehicle in to have a broken exterior side mirror replaced, a new radio antenna installed, or a computerized module reprogrammed, there are absolutely 0 hazardous fluids being drained or disposed of during that specific mechanical process. Yet, the automated shop software will still frequently tack on an environmental fee, simply because it is programmed to appear on every single ticket generated by the front desk. To aggressively protect your finances, you must force the service advisor to logically justify these bottom-of-the-invoice charges. You must point directly to the environmental fee and politely but firmly instruct the advisor to identify the exact hazardous waste generated by your specific repair today. If they are replacing a dry component like a steering wheel clock spring and cannot identify a fluid, you must demand that the fee be entirely deleted from the final total. You have the absolute right to refuse to pay for a disposal service that never actually occurred. The legal landscape regarding these fees varies wildly across the country, but historical trends indicate a growing consumer pushback against these phantom charges. Some jurisdictions require these fees to be explicitly proportional to the actual supplies used, but enforcing this on a shop-by-shop basis is nearly impossible for local regulatory agencies. Therefore, the burden of enforcement falls entirely on you, the educated consumer. By aggressively pushing back on the shop supplies and environmental fees, you are accomplishing something far more important than just saving $30 or $40. You are establishing immediate psychological dominance in the waiting room. When a service advisor observes a consumer systematically dismantling the automatically generated percentage fees on their computer screen, they instantly realize they are dealing with a highly sophisticated individual. They recognize that you understand the hidden mechanics of their invoicing software, and they will immediately abandon their standard predatory tactics. You have now successfully navigated the flat-rate labor matrix, audited the complex parts markup tiers, and aggressively eliminated the phantom miscellaneous fees from your total bill. You have built a formidable defense against the initial estimate. You authorized the fare, negotiated repair, and finally sit back down in the waiting room chair, believing the financial danger has passed. But the true hazard has not even begun. Out in the service bay, while your vehicle is suspended high in the air on a hydraulic lift, a technician is executing a highly standardized, rigorously trained physical routine specifically designed to find new, entirely unrelated mechanical issues to sell you before you can safely escape the building. This specific routine generates billions of dollars in unexpected, often unnecessary revenue annually for the industry, and it relies entirely on catching you completely off guard when the service advisor walks back through those double doors holding a brand new piece of paper covered in alarming red, yellow, and green ink. That piece of paper is officially known within the automotive industry as the multi-point inspection, or simply the MPI. Service advisors will often present this to you under the incredibly friendly guise of a complimentary courtesy check or a free vehicle health report. Do not be deceived by this hospitality. The MPI is not a philanthropic effort by the repair facility to ensure your family remains safe on the highway. It is a highly sophisticated, scientifically optimized sales tool designed to extract maximum revenue from a vehicle that is already captive inside their service bay. The defining feature of the modern multi-point inspection is its psychological weaponization of color. Just like a traffic light, the report utilizes a strict green, yellow, and red color coding system. Green theoretically means a component is in perfect working order. Yellow indicates a part that is showing wear and will require attention in the future. Red signifies a catastrophic, immediate safety failure that demands instant financial intervention. Human beings are biologically and culturally conditioned to react to the color red with immediate anxiety and a sense of impending danger. When the service advisor slides a piece of paper across the desk, and you see 3 bright red boxes next to complex mechanical terms, your rational brain temporarily shuts down, and your emotional, fear-based compliance takes over. This is the exact physiological response the document is engineered to provoke. Let us explore a highly detailed case study set in the current year of 2026 to illustrate exactly how this psychological manipulation unfolds. Consider a consumer named Marcus, an independent graphic designer residing in Seattle, Washington. Marcus scheduled an appointment at a massive, well-known regional dealership strictly to have 2 front tires replaced. He had successfully navigated the initial estimate, agreed to a fair price for the rubber, and was waiting patiently. 45 minutes later, the service advisor approached him holding an MPI report heavily saturated in yellow and red ink. The advisor solemnly informed Marcus that while his tires were being mounted, the master technician discovered that his engine coolant was dangerously degraded, his brake fluid was contaminated with massive amounts of moisture, and his cabin air filter was packed with toxic mold, earning a bright red critical failure rating. The total cost to rectify these newly discovered, apparently life-threatening issues was an additional $490. Marcus, terrified of his engine overheating on his daily commute, immediately authorized the additional work. He fell victim to what industry insiders refer to as the wallet flush. To aggressively defend yourself against the wallet flush, you must fundamentally understand how technicians evaluate automotive fluids. In the vast majority of chain repair shops, the technician simply pulls the dipstick or unscrews the reservoir cap and looks at the color of the fluid. If the transmission fluid is brown instead of bright cherry red, or if the brake fluid looks dark, they instantly mark it as a yellow or red failure on the MPI. This visual inspection method is completely unscientific and historically highly inaccurate. Modern synthetic automotive fluids are subjected to extreme heat and intense mechanical shearing the very moment the engine is started. It is entirely normal and expected for these chemicals to change color rapidly without losing a single percentage of their protective lubricating or hydraulic properties. Dark fluid does not automatically equal bad fluid. To genuinely test the viability of engine coolant, a technician must use specific chemical analysis. They must dip a chemical test strip into the radiator to scientifically measure the reserve alkalinity and the precise freeze point of the glycol mixture. To accurately test brake fluid, they cannot just look at it. They must submerge a specialized electronic tool into the master cylinder. This digital pen sends an electrical current through the hydraulic fluid to precisely measure the exact percentage of water contamination. When the service advisor approached Marcus with the terrifying red and yellow inspection report, Marcus should have immediately paused the transaction and demanded physical proof. He should have asked the advisor to produce the actual chemical test strips or the digital moisture readings that scientifically justified selling him hundreds of dollars in fluid flushes. In the overwhelming majority of cases, the repair facility will not be able to produce this empirical data because the tests were never actually performed. The recommendation was based entirely on a superficial visual glance, or even more insidiously, a computerized mileage algorithm that automatically recommends a flush simply because the vehicle reached 30,000 miles, regardless of the actual physical condition of the liquid inside the machine. Imagine if you visited your primary care physician for a routine physical, and without running a single blood test or taking your blood pressure, the doctor looked at your skin tone, declared you were experiencing organ failure, and immediately scheduled you for an incredibly expensive emergency surgery. You would demand a second opinion, blood panels, and an MRI before allowing anyone to operate on your body. You must apply this exact same standard of rigorous evidence to your vehicle. When you are presented with a yellow or red maintenance recommendation, you must forcefully separate the genuine, immediate mechanical safety hazards from the speculative, profit-driven upsells. A genuinely bald tire showing internal steel cords is an immediate, indisputable safety hazard. A brake pad worn down to the metal backing plate is a critical failure that cannot be ignored. These are legitimate red items that require immediate action to protect human life. However, a slightly dirty engine air filter, a throttle body that has a thin layer of carbon buildup, or a power steering system that a technician vaguely thinks should be flushed are highly subjective, long-term maintenance items. They have absolutely no business being coated in terrifying red ink to force an immediate, panicked purchase on a Tuesday afternoon when you only came in for an oil change. The fundamental strategy here is to politely but firmly tell the service advisor that you are strictly declining all yellow and red recommended maintenance items today, and that you will review the paper report at home and budget for those specific services at a later date. You are intentionally breaking their carefully constructed sales momentum. You are taking the power of the immediate decision away from the pressurized environment of the waiting room and bringing it back into your own home, where you can research the historical trends of your specific vehicle model and consult your factory owner manual. But let us assume you have successfully navigated the initial estimate, audited the parts matrix, eliminated the phantom fees, and successfully deflected the high-pressure wallet flush tactics on the multi-point inspection. You have paid the final bill and the service advisor hands you the keys. You might believe the transaction is finally complete and you are entirely safe. You are not. The most legally binding, financially devastating aspect of this entire process is actually printed in microscopic, almost entirely illegible light gray text on the very back of the final invoice you just signed. This hidden legal language dictates exactly what happens to your vehicle and your bank account if the repair catastrophically fails tomorrow morning. And we are about to decode the terrifying reality of the mechanic lien and the arbitration trap. When you turn that printed invoice over to blindly sign your name on the bottom line, you are entirely ignoring a dense block of microscopic, light gray text printed on the reverse side of the paper. This is not standard administrative boilerplate. This is a highly aggressive, legally binding contract meticulously drafted by corporate attorneys representing the automotive repair industry. This contract dictates exactly what happens to your vehicle and your bank account if the repair catastrophically fails tomorrow morning. And we are about to decode the terrifying reality of the mechanic lien and the arbitration trap. You must understand that the moment you sign that document, you are willfully surrendering incredibly powerful consumer rights, completely tilting the legal landscape in favor of the repair facility before a single wrench is ever turned on your vehicle. Let us begin by dissecting the absolute most powerful weapon in the auto repair industry arsenal: the mechanic lien. A mechanic lien is a formidable statutory right that exists in various forms across all 50 states in the United States. It grants the repair shop the absolute legal authority to retain physical possession of your personal property, your vehicle, until their financial invoice is satisfied in full. Let us examine a deeply troubling case study to illustrate the devastating potential outcomes of this law. Consider a consumer named Thomas, a restaurant manager living in Miami, Florida in the year 2026. Thomas brought his imported luxury sedan to an independent specialty shop to diagnose an intermittent electrical draw that was killing his battery overnight. The shop failed to properly diagnose the root cause and instead blindly replaced the alternator, the battery, and two massive computerized control modules. The final bill was presented to Thomas for $3,800. Thomas realized none of these parts actually fixed the parasitic battery drain and adamantly refused to pay for the completely unnecessary and highly expensive components. He demanded his keys back. The shop owner simply smiled, placed the keys in a locked drawer, and informed Thomas that the vehicle would remain firmly parked inside their chain-link security fence under a legally executed mechanic lien until the entire invoice was paid in cash. Thomas was suddenly trapped without his primary mode of transportation. But the financial bleeding had only just begun. What Thomas did not realize is that a mechanic lien almost always activates a secondary clause buried in the fine print: daily storage fees. The shop began legally charging Thomas $75 per day simply to park his own car in their back lot. Step by step, the process became a financial nightmare. After 30 days of refusing to pay the disputed bill, the storage fees alone had added over $2,000 to his existing debt. By day 45, the repair facility initiated the legal paperwork with the county government to force a public auction of his vehicle. The shop legally sold Thomas's $35,000 luxury sedan to a wholesale buyer for a fraction of its value, strictly to recover their disputed repair bill and their artificially generated storage fees. Thomas completely lost his primary asset over a contested diagnostic error. Imagine if you took your expensive laptop computer to a neighborhood repair facility, disagreed with their final price for a screen replacement, and the shop legally had the right to lock your laptop in a safe, charge you $20 a day to keep it there, and eventually sell your personal computer to a complete stranger to cover their bill. That scenario sounds like blatant theft, yet it is the exact legal reality of the automotive repair industry under the mechanic lien system. The power dynamic is entirely skewed against you. If you ever find yourself in a severe dispute over an inflated or fraudulent repair bill, you must understand that withholding payment is the absolute most dangerous tactic you can employ. Historical trends dictate that the shop will always win a physical standoff over the vehicle. If you must remove your vehicle from a predatory shop, the safest potential outcome involves paying the disputed bill using a major credit card and explicitly writing the words "paying under protest" directly next to your physical signature on their invoice. By legally documenting that you are paying strictly under duress to recover your hostage property, you preserve your right to initiate a massive credit card chargeback dispute or file a civil lawsuit later, while safely getting your vehicle out of their physical possession and stopping the daily storage fees from accumulating. However, filing a civil lawsuit brings us directly to the second devastating trap buried in that microscopic gray text: the mandatory binding arbitration clause. As you scan the back of the invoice, you will inevitably find a paragraph stating that any and all disputes arising from this transaction shall be resolved by binding arbitration. By signing the front of the document, you are actively waiving your Seventh Amendment constitutional right to a trial by a jury of your peers in a public United States courtroom. You are explicitly waiving your right to join a class action lawsuit with other defrauded consumers. Let us look at another detailed case study. Emily, a freelance architect from Denver, Colorado, took her heavily utilized sport utility vehicle to a massive national chain shop for a routine timing belt replacement. The heavily rushed technician failed to properly torque the primary tensioner pulley mounting bolt. 3 days later, while Emily was driving on the interstate at 70 miles per hour, that specific bolt vibrated loose and snapped. The timing belt immediately slipped off the gears, causing the internal engine pistons to violently smash into the stationary engine valves. The engine was instantly and permanently destroyed. The replacement cost was quoted at $9,200. The corporate repair chain completely denied all responsibility, legally claiming the bolt itself was a manufacturer defect, not a labor error. Emily hired an aggressive civil attorney to sue the corporation for gross negligence. The local civil court judge took one look at the repair order Emily signed, pointed directly to the arbitration clause, and instantly dismissed the entire lawsuit. Emily was legally forced into a private, highly secretive arbitration hearing located in a corporate conference room, not a public courthouse. Here is the step-by-step reality of forced arbitration. The arbitrator is a private contractor, frequently a retired judge or corporate attorney. The massive automotive repair corporation pays the arbitration firm hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in retainer fees to handle their national volume of consumer disputes. As an individual consumer, you are paying them nothing. Historical trends in consumer advocacy clearly demonstrate that arbitrators operating in these private systems overwhelmingly favor the massive corporate entities that consistently pay their ongoing salaries. There is no jury. There is severely limited legal discovery, meaning Emily could not legally force the repair shop to hand over their internal employee training records or the technician's disciplinary history. And most terrifyingly, the final decision of the arbitrator is legally binding with virtually zero avenue for a standard legal appeal. The arbitrator in Emily's case ruled that she could not definitively, scientifically prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the technician failed to torque the bolt, rather than the bolt succumbing to microscopic metallurgical fatigue. Emily completely lost the case. She was left with a destroyed $9,000 engine, thousands of dollars in wasted legal fees, and absolutely no recourse. The arbitration clause is a corporate shield specifically designed to protect predatory repair shops from facing public accountability and catastrophic jury verdicts. To defend against this, you must rigorously document the exact mechanical condition of your vehicle the moment you arrive at the shop. You must use your smartphone to record a continuous, high-definition, date-stamped video of your engine bay, your dashboard showing the exact mileage and warning lights, and the entire exterior of the vehicle before you ever hand the keys to the service advisor. If a catastrophic failure occurs days later, this indisputable digital evidence is your only defense in an arbitration hearing, where it is entirely your word against a master technician and a corporate legal team. You have now survived the initial estimate, you have audited the complex parts markup matrix, you have eliminated the phantom miscellaneous fees, you have successfully deflected the high-pressure wallet flush tactics on the multi-point inspection, and you completely understand the severe legal traps buried on the back of the invoice. You are finally standing at the front counter, your vehicle is physically ready to be driven home, and it is time to actually pay the final bill. But what happens when the final total is $2,500, and you simply do not have the liquid cash in your checking account to cover that massive unexpected expense? The service advisor smiles warmly, senses your profound financial distress, and slides a brightly colored glossy pamphlet across the desk, offering you a specialized store-branded auto repair credit card with an incredibly enticing introductory offer of 0% interest for 6 full months. This is not a generous financial lifeline extended by a caring business. It is a carefully engineered, devastatingly effective debt trap designed to lock you into a vicious cycle of exorbitant compound interest. And we are about to critically tear apart the mathematical reality of deferred interest automotive financing. Let us critically tear apart the mathematical reality of deferred interest automotive financing. When you are staring down a catastrophic $2,500 repair bill, and your checking account balance is dangerously low, the highly trained service advisor will recognize your hesitation. They are trained to read human body language, and the moment you sigh, look away, or mention needing to call a spouse to discuss finances, they will deploy the retail credit application. They will present a glossy, brightly colored brochure advertising a store-branded auto repair credit card. The central massive text on this brochure will proudly declare 0% interest for 6 full months on purchases over a certain dollar amount. To a financially desperate consumer in the year 2026, this sounds like a miraculous rescue. It sounds like you are getting a free loan from the repair facility to get your vehicle back on the road. This is a devastating optical illusion engineered by massive third-party consumer banks that partner with these repair chains. You must fundamentally understand the massive legal difference between a true 0% annual percentage rate introductory offer on a traditional bank credit card and a deferred interest promotional offer on a retail store card. They are entirely different financial instruments with wildly different potential outcomes. Let us examine a highly detailed case study to expose exactly how this financial trap physically operates. Consider a consumer named Brian, a warehouse logistics coordinator living in Chicago, Illinois. Brian brought his older commuter vehicle into a massive national chain repair shop because it was severely overheating. The shop diagnosed a blown head gasket and a cracked radiator. The final negotiated estimate was exactly $3,000. Brian did not have $3,000 in liquid emergency savings. The service advisor pushed the store-branded credit card, emphasizing the 6 months of zero interest. Brian applied on a digital tablet at the counter, was instantly approved for a $3,000 credit limit, and charged the entire repair to the new card. Here is exactly where the mathematical trap is set. When Brian receives his first monthly statement, the minimum payment due will be incredibly low, perhaps merely $45 or $50. This is a deliberate psychological tactic by the bank. They want the consumer to feel comfortable. They want the consumer to pay only the absolute minimum requirement. Brian, feeling financially relieved, sets up an automatic monthly payment for $50. Month 1 passes. Month 2 passes. Brian continues to pay the minimum, fully believing he is successfully navigating the 0% promotional period. However, historical trends in consumer finance reveal a terrifying reality regarding deferred interest. If Brian pays $50 a month for 6 months, he will have paid a total of $300 toward the principal balance. When the promotional period expires at exactly midnight on the final day of the 6th month, Brian still owes $2,700 on the original invoice. Because Brian did not pay the entire $3,000 balance down to absolute zero before the promotional window closed, a devastating financial mechanism called retroactive interest is instantly triggered. The bank does not simply start charging interest on the remaining $2,700 from month 7 onward. Instead, the bank reaches back through time to the exact second Brian swiped that card at the repair shop counter 6 months ago. They calculate the incredibly high standard interest rate, which on these specific retail cards is routinely 29.99% or higher, on the entire original $3,000 balance, compounded daily for the past 180 days. In a single overnight billing cycle, Brian will see a massive, catastrophic interest charge of potentially hundreds of dollars instantly slapped onto his statement. His required minimum payment will violently skyrocket, and a vast majority of his subsequent monthly payments will go entirely toward servicing the newly generated high-interest debt, rather than reducing the actual principal balance of the auto repair. He is now trapped in a vicious cycle of compound interest, paying for a mechanical repair that may very well fail before he ever successfully pays off the credit card. Imagine if you rented an apartment with a promotional lease that stated your rent was completely free for 6 months, provided you painted the entire building before the period ended. If you painted 99% of the building but missed a single window frame on the final day, the landlord would legally charge you for the entire 6 months of back rent all at once. You would consider that deeply predatory. Yet this is the exact standardized legal framework of deferred interest financing, utilized by thousands of auto repair facilities across the United States. Furthermore, you must analyze the hidden motivation behind why the service advisor is so incredibly aggressive in pushing this specific credit application. The advisor is not a financial counselor trying to protect your budget. Historical trends in industry compensation structures show that service advisors frequently receive a direct financial bounty, a cash kickback, from the bank for every single new credit card account they successfully open at the front counter. Additionally, the repair facility pays a significantly lower merchant processing fee to the bank when you use their specific store card compared to swiping a standard travel or rewards credit card. Opening that card generates immediate, risk-free profit for the repair shop and the advisor, while completely transferring all the long-term financial risk directly onto your shoulders. Beyond the immediate threat of retroactive interest, opening a store-branded credit card at the absolute maximum limit of the repair cost triggers a secondary, hidden consequence that directly impacts your overall financial health. When Brian was approved for a $3,000 credit limit and instantly charged a $3,000 repair, his credit utilization ratio for that specific account hit exactly 100%. The major consumer credit bureaus monitor this utilization ratio daily. Maxing out a brand new line of credit instantaneously signals extreme financial distress to the algorithmic scoring models. The potential outcome is a severe, immediate drop in Brian's overall credit score. This seemingly isolated decision at an auto repair counter could directly prevent him from securing a favorable mortgage rate, obtaining a standard auto loan for a reliable replacement vehicle, or even passing a pre-employment credit screening for a new career opportunity. To aggressively protect your financial stability, you must view these store-branded credit cards with extreme skepticism. You must meticulously read the dense, highly regulated disclosure paperwork the advisor hands you. You are specifically searching for the exact phrase deferred interest, or the explicit warning that interest will be charged to your account from the purchase date if the promotional balance is not paid in full within the promotional period. If you see that exact terminology, you are dealing with a retroactive interest trap. You must thoroughly explore alternative financing potential outcomes, such as utilizing an existing standard credit card with a known, fixed interest rate, seeking a small personal loan from a local credit union, or negotiating a direct payment plan with the shop owner that does not involve a third-party predatory lending institution. Now you have successfully secured the funding, dodged the deferred interest trap, paid the invoice, and finally driven your vehicle off the lot. You feel a massive wave of relief as you merge onto the highway. The engine sounds smooth. The dashboard is entirely clear of warning lights. You believe the ordeal is completely finished. But the automotive repair industry has one final, incredibly sophisticated maneuver designed to extract even more revenue from you when the initial repair inevitably fails to solve the underlying root cause of the problem. 2 days later, your check engine light illuminates again. You drive back to the exact same shop, demanding they fix their mistake under warranty. The service advisor will look at your vehicle, look back at you with a perfectly rehearsed expression of deep concern, and calmly introduce you to a highly complex psychological tactic known as the diagnostic shell game. The diagnostic shell game is the standardized industry term for when a repair facility effectively uses your personal checking account to fund their highly unscientific process of trial and error. They did not actually diagnose the root failure of your machine. They merely threw an incredibly expensive, heavily marked up physical part at a generic symptom, completely failed to resolve the actual underlying mechanical issue, and are now attempting to mathematically shift the entire financial burden of their own diagnostic incompetence directly onto your shoulders. Let us look at a highly specific case study involving a consumer named Amanda, a pediatric nurse living in Austin, Texas in the year 2026. Amanda drove her compact hybrid commuter vehicle into a heavily advertised independent shop because her gasoline engine was violently shuddering at highway speeds, triggering a rapidly flashing check engine light on her dashboard display. The shop charged her a standard $150 diagnostic fee, confidently declared that engine cylinder number 3 had a completely failed ignition coil, and charged her an additional $400 to replace that single electrical coil and the associated spark plug. She paid the invoice, drove away, and exactly 48 hours later, while commuting to the medical center, the exact same violent shuddering returned, accompanied by the exact same flashing dashboard light. Amanda immediately returned to the repair facility. The service advisor did not apologize. Instead, they took the vehicle back into the service bay, emerged 30 minutes later, and executed the diagnostic shell game perfectly. The advisor stated that the brand new ignition coil was functioning flawlessly, but installing that powerful new electrical component immediately exposed a severe, pre-existing weakness in the underlying direct fuel injector for that exact same engine cylinder. The new estimate to replace the fuel injector was presented at $650. When Amanda rightfully demanded a complete refund for the first $400 repair that completely failed to fix her vehicle, the advisor deployed the rigid industry standard deflection script. They confidently told her that the ignition coil absolutely needed to be replaced regardless of the current issue, and that it was mechanically impossible to test the fuel injector until the ignition system was fully restored to factory specifications. This is a massive, highly profitable fabrication. Advanced automotive diagnostics in the year 2026 absolutely do not require blindly replacing expensive parts to uncover subsequent failures down the line. A genuine master technician utilizes a highly sophisticated device called an automotive oscilloscope. This incredible piece of diagnostic equipment allows a skilled mechanic to visually monitor the exact electrical waveforms of both the ignition coil and the fuel injector simultaneously, in real time, while the engine is actively running. A waveform is a visual representation of electrical voltage over time. By analyzing the precise shape, slope, and duration of this electrical wave on the computer screen, the master diagnostician can definitively see the internal magnetic field of an ignition coil collapsing, or the microscopic mechanical opening of a fuel injector pintle valve, without ever unbolting a single component from the engine block. They can definitively pinpoint whether the engine misfire is caused by a lack of electrical spark, a lack of combustible fuel, or a lack of internal mechanical compression. The repair facility Amanda visited did not employ a master diagnostician equipped with an oscilloscope. They employed what the industry quietly refers to as a parts thrower. A parts thrower is a technician who strictly relies on reading generic computer codes from a handheld scanner and simply replacing the most common, statistically likely component associated with that specific code. When the first part fails to fix the vehicle, they simply move down the computerized mathematical list to the next most likely component, continuously billing the consumer for every single incorrect guess. Historical trends clearly show that consumers lose hundreds of millions of dollars annually paying for perfectly functional parts that were prematurely replaced during this exact cycle of diagnostic guesswork. Imagine if you hired an expensive, licensed plumber to fix a massive puddle of water flooding your residential basement floor. The plumber confidently looks at the water, charges you $1,000 to completely replace your main hot water heater, and leaves the premises. 2 days later, your basement is completely flooded again. You call the plumber back, and they tell you that the new hot water heater is working perfectly, but the increased water pressure from the new tank caused a previously hidden crack in a completely different copper pipe to burst, and they now require an additional $2,000 to fix the pipe. You would never accept that explanation. You would rightfully recognize that the plumber simply guessed at the source of the water without actually tracing the leak back to its true physical origin. You must apply this exact same ruthless logic to your auto repair facility. To aggressively defend against the diagnostic shell game, your negotiation strategy must begin before you ever authorize the very first repair. When the service advisor presents the initial estimate to fix a complex drivability issue, you must look them directly in the eye and ask one highly specific question. You must ask, if I pay you this exact amount of money to replace this specific component today, and my vehicle exhibits the exact same symptom tomorrow morning, what is your official shop policy regarding a complete refund of this original invoice? The advisor will almost certainly hesitate. They will immediately attempt to walk back their absolute certainty. They will start using qualifying words like probably, highly likely, or most common fix. The exact moment you hear those qualifying words, you know with absolute certainty that they are fundamentally guessing with your personal finances. If you are already caught in the middle of the shell game like Amanda, you must instantly shift your negotiation strategy. You absolutely do not authorize the second, more expensive repair blindly. You must forcefully demand that the shop completely credit the labor cost of the original, failed repair toward the new invoice. You must logically argue that you paid them specifically for their professional diagnostic expertise, and they fundamentally failed to provide that service. If they replaced an ignition coil and the fuel injector was the actual root problem, the diagnostic procedure was demonstrably flawed from the very beginning. Many highly reputable, ethically run shops will recognize their diagnostic error and actively work with you, heavily discounting the second repair or completely covering the labor costs to make the situation right. Predatory shops will simply refuse, deflect blame onto the vehicle, and point directly back to the binding arbitration clause hidden on the back of the invoice. Furthermore, you must always aggressively exercise your state consumer rights regarding discarded components. You have the absolute legal right in almost every jurisdiction in the United States to request the return of your old, replaced parts. You must make this demand explicitly clear and have it written directly on the intake form before you hand over the keys. You must legally document the phrase "I hereby formally request the return of all replaced parts and components." If the shop replaces a $400 electronic module and claims it was completely dead, take that specific part home in a cardboard box. You can often pay a highly specialized independent electrical shop a tiny fraction of the cost to bench test that removed component. If the independent specialist provides documentation proving the old part was functioning perfectly, you now possess the exact physical and scientific evidence required to force a massive credit card chargeback against the predatory repair facility for consumer fraud. You have now survived the initial estimate, audited the parts matrix, completely eliminated the phantom overhead fees, navigated the deferred interest credit trap, and successfully fought your way out of the diagnostic shell game. You have finally secured a genuinely repaired vehicle. You drive away, knowing you have thoroughly mastered the local repair ecosystem. But exactly 3 weeks later, you take a cross-country road trip for a summer family vacation. You are 500 miles away from your home, driving through a completely unfamiliar, desolate state, when your engine suddenly loses all power and dies on the side of a major interstate highway. You have your original repair invoice sitting in the glove box, proudly displaying a massive, colorful stamp that guarantees a nationwide warranty on all parts and labor. You call the toll-free number, fully expecting immediate financial salvation, only to discover the absolute darkest, most heavily guarded secret of the entire automotive repair industry. The nationwide warranty network is not a safety net. It is an incredibly complex bureaucratic maze designed specifically to legally deny your claim when you are at your absolute most vulnerable, and we are going to tear apart exactly how they force you to pay for the exact same repair twice. The nationwide warranty network is fundamentally misunderstood by almost every driver on the road today. When that service advisor originally handed you the final invoice with that beautiful, brightly colored stamp promising 24 months or 24,000 miles of nationwide protection, your brain instantly interpreted that as an absolute financial safety net. You inherently assume that the specific repair chain you visited operates as a massive, unified corporate entity that will seamlessly honor their work at any of their thousands of locations coast to coast. This is a deliberate, highly orchestrated optical illusion. In reality, the vast majority of independent shops and massive franchise repair chains do not actually underwrite or financially back their own extended warranties. They outsource this massive financial liability to third-party corporate warranty administrators. These administrators are completely separate financial entities, often located in office parks thousands of miles away from where your vehicle was repaired. Their entire highly lucrative business model is mathematically predicated on collecting premium fees from the repair shops while simultaneously executing strict, aggressive risk mitigation strategies designed to legally deny as many consumer claims as humanly possible based on microscopic contractual technicalities. Let us examine a highly detailed case study set in the summer of 2026 to expose exactly how this bureaucratic trap is sprung. Consider a consumer named Kevin, a structural engineer living in Grand Rapids, Michigan. 3 weeks prior to a massive family vacation, Kevin proactively took his heavily loaded sport utility vehicle to a highly rated local chain shop to have the primary engine water pump replaced. He paid $1,200, received the nationwide warranty paperwork, and felt entirely confident in his vehicle reliability. Fast forward to mid-July. Kevin is driving his family across the country. He is traveling 80 miles per hour on a desolate stretch of Interstate 80 in rural Wyoming, hundreds of miles from the nearest major city, when he hears a catastrophic metallic grinding noise. A massive cloud of white steam violently erupts from beneath the hood, completely blinding his windshield. He safely wrestles the dead vehicle to the shoulder of the highway. Coolant is pouring onto the hot asphalt. Kevin retrieves his original repair invoice from the glove box, sees the toll-free warranty number, and feels a brief moment of relief. He dials the number, fully expecting the corporation to immediately dispatch a tow truck and fix their defective water pump at no cost. This is the exact moment Kevin enters the administrative maze. The voice on the other end of the phone does not belong to a mechanic or a customer service representative from the shop in Michigan. It belongs to a claims adjuster working for the third-party administrator. The adjuster instantly hits Kevin with the first hidden trap: the strict network towing radius. The warranty contract dictates that they will only cover the cost of towing to an officially affiliated network repair facility, and they strictly cap that reimbursement at a maximum of $75. The absolute closest network shop to Kevin in rural Wyoming is over 120 miles away. The local heavy-duty towing service demands $600 upfront to transport the vehicle that distance. Kevin is immediately forced to pay $525 out of his own pocket just to reach the approved destination, a cost completely external to the promised warranty protection. When the tow truck finally drops the crippled vehicle at the unfamiliar network shop in Wyoming, Kevin encounters the second, and absolutely most fatal technicality hidden deeply within the fine print: the mandatory prior authorization clause. This specific legal clause explicitly states that the warranty administrator must be contacted and must issue a formal, recorded verbal authorization number before the new repair facility turns a single wrench or begins any physical teardown to diagnose the failure. Because Kevin is utterly exhausted, dealing with a stressed family in a hot waiting room, he simply hands the keys to the local service advisor and begs them to figure out what happened. The local technician rolls the vehicle into the bay, unbolts the timing cover, completely removes the shattered water pump, and then calls the warranty administrator to report the failure. The claims adjuster looks at the file, notes that the engine was dismantled before an authorization code was legally issued, and instantly, legally voids the entire warranty claim. They completely deny coverage. They argue that because their own independent inspector was not given the opportunity to verify the failure before the engine was taken apart, they cannot definitively prove the water pump failed due to a manufacturing defect rather than external damage. Kevin is now entirely responsible for the new repair bill. He paid $1,200 in Michigan, and he is about to pay another $1,400 in Wyoming for the exact same physical repair, completely negating the entire concept of the nationwide warranty. But let us rewind the timeline and imagine a scenario where Kevin successfully navigates the prior authorization trap. Let us assume he rigorously reads the fine print, stops the Wyoming technician from touching the vehicle, calls the administrator, and successfully secures the authorization code. The technician tears down the engine and discovers that the internal impeller shaft of the brand new water pump completely sheared in half. The broken metal shaft physically locked the timing chain, which instantly snapped, causing the internal engine pistons to violently collide with the engine valves. The engine is entirely destroyed and requires a complete replacement costing $8,000. Kevin calls the claims adjuster back, expecting the warranty to cover the destroyed engine because their defective water pump directly caused the catastrophic damage. The adjuster calmly introduces Kevin to the ultimate legal loophole utilized by the automotive warranty industry: the consequential damage exclusion. This terrifying clause is universally standard in almost every aftermarket warranty contract. It explicitly states that the warranty will only cover the specific component that originally failed, and it absolutely will not cover any secondary damage caused by that failure to other surrounding, non-covered parts. The adjuster informs Kevin that they will gladly approve the payment for a brand new $150 water pump, and they will pay the local shop for the 3 hours of labor to install that specific pump. However, they will completely and legally deny the $8,000 engine replacement, because the engine block and cylinder heads were not the original parts repaired in Michigan. Imagine if you purchased a brand new, highly expensive premium refrigerator for your newly renovated kitchen, and it came with a comprehensive warranty. 3 weeks later, the internal compressor catastrophically shorts out and catches fire, completely burning down your entire house. The manufacturer warranty administrator reviews the case and mails you a check for exactly $200 to replace the defective compressor, but entirely refuses to compensate you for the loss of your $500,000 home, citing that the house itself was not the covered appliance. You would consider this a profound miscarriage of justice, yet this is the exact standardized legal framework governing automotive repair warranties across the United States. Furthermore, even on the approved portion of the claim, the administrator utilizes aggressive financial caps to severely limit their payout. They enforce a strict labor rate maximum. If the network shop in Wyoming charges $180 per hour for labor, but the warranty administrator fine print caps their payout at $110 per hour, Kevin is legally responsible for paying the $70 per hour difference out of pocket. Additionally, they will actively deny coverage for all associated shop supplies, completely refuse to pay for the expensive specialized synthetic engine coolant lost during the failure, and reject any associated environmental disposal fees. The nationwide warranty is essentially a deeply discounted coupon heavily burdened by catastrophic legal exclusions, completely designed to protect the corporate entity, while actively shifting the ultimate financial liability back onto the consumer. To aggressively protect your family during a warranty failure, you must treat the situation as a hostile legal negotiation from the exact second the vehicle breaks down. You must never assume the new shop is communicating effectively with the administrator. You must personally retain control of the communication loop. You must explicitly instruct the receiving shop to diagnose the vehicle visually only, and completely forbid them from removing a single bolt until you personally have the administrator on a recorded phone line providing a verifiable authorization code. You must demand the service advisor heavily document that the failure was explicitly caused by a defective part and not consumer negligence. But what happens when you follow every single rule? You play their incredibly complex bureaucratic game perfectly, and the warranty administrator or the predatory repair facility still completely refuses to honor their legal commitment. What happens when you are stranded, your bank account is drained, and you realize that standard consumer protection logic completely fails against massive corporate legal teams? Kevin is sitting in a Wyoming waiting room, staring at an entirely destroyed vehicle and an $8,000 estimate, realizing he has been thoroughly scammed by a legally binding piece of paper. You might believe the situation is completely hopeless. You might believe the corporation has definitively won. But there is one final ultimate weapon that American consumers possess against predatory automotive repair facilities and bad faith warranty administrators. It is a terrifyingly effective strategy that entirely bypasses the local shop manager, instantly overrides the binding arbitration clause, and invokes the massive sweeping enforcement power of the federal and state governments. We are about to deploy the absolute nuclear option of consumer auto repair defense, and it begins with understanding exactly how to trigger a catastrophic, targeted legal audit that no repair shop owner can survive. When you are dealing with a hostile repair facility manager who aggressively points to the binding arbitration clause and entirely refuses to honor a legitimate warranty claim, you must bypass their localized corporate authority entirely. You accomplish this by weaponizing the profound investigative power of state and federal regulatory agencies. In the year 2026, the automotive repair industry is highly regulated at the state level, But shops routinely rely on the historical trend that less than 1% of defrauded consumers will ever actually take the time to formally involve the government. Depending on your specific location in the United States, this regulatory body might be the Bureau of Automotive Repair, the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, the State Department of Motor Vehicles Investigative Division, or the Direct Office of the Attorney General. These specific agencies do not employ standard customer service representatives. They employ sworn, highly trained state investigators who possess the absolute statutory authority to physically audit a business, level devastating financial fines, and permanently revoke the commercial operating license of a predatory repair shop. Let us examine a highly detailed case study to demonstrate the terrifying effectiveness of this strategy. Consider a consumer named Daniel, a public high school history teacher living in Albany, New York. Daniel took his primary commuter vehicle to a well-known regional transmission specialist because the vehicle was severely slipping out of third gear. He authorized a massive repair. He paid $6,200 for what the invoice explicitly stated was a completely remanufactured, heavy-duty transmission assembly. 3 months later, the transmission violently failed on the highway, completely locking up the drive wheels. The vehicle was towed back to the exact same transmission shop. The manager completely denied the warranty claim, falsely stating that Daniel must have been illegally towing a heavy trailer and abused the vehicle, thereby voiding the contract. Daniel knew he had never attached a trailer to the car in his life. The manager flatly refused to rebuild the unit and told Daniel his only recourse was to initiate a private arbitration hearing. Knowing full well the arbitration firm was on the corporate payroll, Daniel did not argue. He did not threaten a lawsuit. He calmly requested his keys, paid a private tow truck to move his vehicle to his own driveway, and immediately went to his computer. Daniel filed a comprehensive, chronologically organized formal complaint directly with the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles Division of Vehicle Safety Services. He uploaded a high-resolution scan of the original estimate, the final invoice proving he paid for a remanufactured unit, the written warranty denial from the manager, and a certified statement from a secondary independent master mechanic who had inspected the failed transmission in Daniel's driveway. That independent mechanic discovered that the regional shop had never actually installed a remanufactured transmission. They had simply taken a used, high-mileage transmission from a local junkyard, spray-painted the exterior aluminum housing silver to make it look brand new, and bolted it into Daniel's vehicle, pocketing thousands of dollars in pure fraudulent profit. What happened next represents the absolute worst-case scenario for a predatory business owner. An unannounced state automotive investigator walked directly through the front doors of that transmission shop, flashed a state badge, and demanded immediate, unrestricted access to the commercial back office. The investigator demanded to see the physical wholesale purchase receipts for the exact transmission bolted into Daniel's car. Because the shop could not produce a legitimate invoice from a certified remanufacturing facility, the state had them completely dead to rights. Historical trends dictate that state agencies aggressively pursue these specific types of blatant consumer fraud to set public examples. The state agency immediately levied a massive $25,000 civil penalty against the business, forced the owner to completely refund Daniel his entire $6,200, and placed the facility on a strict probationary watch list. The arbitration clause that the manager tried to hide behind was rendered completely utterly useless because arbitration only applies to private civil disputes, not state-led criminal or regulatory fraud investigations. Imagine if a commercial airline pilot decided to entirely skip their mandatory pre-flight safety checks strictly to save time and increase their daily flight volume. If the passengers discovered this terrifying breach of protocol, the airline corporation could not force those passengers into a secret arbitration room to quietly resolve the issue. The Federal Aviation Administration would immediately intervene, ground the aircraft, and strip the pilot of their license to protect the general public. State automotive regulatory agencies operate with that exact same jurisdictional supremacy. They exist specifically to eradicate businesses that operate in bad faith and threaten public safety on the highways. To successfully execute this nuclear option, your physical documentation must be absolutely bulletproof. Regulatory investigators are completely overwhelmed with thousands of cases, and they will immediately dismiss complaints that are purely emotional or lacking hard evidence. You are not writing an emotional essay about how disrespected you felt in the waiting room. You are constructing a cold, calculated, highly structured legal dossier. This dossier must contain the original signed intake authorization, the computerized diagnostic report, the final itemized invoice, the specific warranty contract, and a highly detailed communication log. You must meticulously record the exact date and time of every single phone call, the specific name of the employee you spoke with, and a factual summary of their exact verbal statements. The state investigator uses this precise paper trail to build an inescapable timeline of deceptive practices. Furthermore, if the fraud you experienced involves the predatory deferred interest credit card traps or the deceptive third-party warranty administrators we analyzed earlier, you must escalate your attack to the federal level. You accomplish this by filing a highly detailed complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Federal Trade Commission. These massive federal watchdog agencies do not typically intervene in isolated individual disputes, but they aggressively hunt for established historical trends and nationwide patterns of corporate deception. If a specific third-party warranty administrator is utilizing the exact same bad faith prior authorization loophole to deny thousands of legitimate engine replacement claims across all 50 states, your highly documented complaint becomes a critical piece of evidence in a massive federal investigation. The potential outcomes of these federal actions frequently result in sweeping class action settlements, massive corporate restructuring, and hundreds of millions of dollars in forced consumer restitution. You are not just fighting for your own bank account. You are actively dismantling the architecture of the scam for the entire American public. You now possess a complete end-to-end mastery of the automotive repair ecosystem in the United States. You have systematically dismantled the hidden mechanics of the flat-rate labor manual, stripping away the immense profitability of overlapping labor charges. You have exposed the deeply guarded parts markup matrix, forcing absolute transparency regarding the wholesale origins of your mechanical components. You have aggressively eradicated phantom shop supplies fees and environmental disposal charges from the bottom of your invoice. You have successfully navigated the intense psychological warfare of the color-coded multi-point inspection, permanently separating genuine, immediate safety hazards from profit-driven maintenance upsells. You have completely bypassed the terrifying legal traps of the mechanic lien and the forced arbitration clause. You have decoded the mathematical devastation of deferred interest retail credit cards. You have survived the diagnostic shell game by demanding scientific, oscilloscope-driven proof of failure. You have pierced the impenetrable veil of the nationwide warranty network by mastering the prior authorization loopholes. And finally, you have secured the ultimate regulatory weapon, transforming yourself from a vulnerable target into an incredibly dangerous, highly educated consumer capable of leveling state and federal investigations against any business that attempts to defraud your family. You have built an absolute fortress around your personal finances regarding automotive maintenance. But knowing exactly how to aggressively manage the repair of your current vehicle is only the first half of the perpetual automotive battle. Because eventually, regardless of how perfectly you maintain it, your current vehicle will suffer a catastrophic failure that mathematically exceeds its total market value, and you will be forced to replace it. This means you will be forced to walk directly into the single most highly engineered, psychologically dangerous, and financially devastating retail environment on the face of the earth: the modern dealership finance and insurance office. The incredibly complex, legally binding paperwork you sign in that specific windowless back room can secretly double the total cost of your next vehicle before you ever even see the keys, locking you into a decade of suffocating negative equity. I am going to show you exactly how to tear their financing contracts apart line by line, expose the hidden yield spread premiums, and absolutely dominate the modern car buying transaction in our next masterclass presentation.